Welcome back to Between Two Racks with the Kilo crew. This week, we've got another round of rapid fire questions from our viewers. Whether it's going to be rapid fire or not, we shall find out. Let's kick it. First question I have is, do you think other strength methodologies underemphasize the speed of eccentric?
Maybe. I don't know what other strength methodologies that is referring there, but to me, it's a tricky question because I do think that there comes a point in time in training where you need to be able to train with a faster eccentric. And our system is mistakenly sometimes regarded as a system that only uses slow controlled eccentric, but it is not completely true. It really is depending on the client status, the objective, and where they are in time. And then also, if you see some of the programs we post on social media or that we sell to the general public, because we don't have a specific targeted client, we go very general. So which is why we tend to have more controlled tempo. So in our opinion, when you're a novice trainee and you're learning strength training for the first time, to have a slow controlled eccentric goes a long way in, one, building some type of eccentric base in terms of eccentric control. It's not that it's necessarily going to build crazy eccentric strength. It won't, because the load is not such that it will favor true eccentric strength development, but it will build control. It will allow the client to develop better intermuscular coordination. It will allow the client to better groove the movement, to better see where they can shift their bodies to position themselves better for better leverage on a squat, for example. So there's a lot of advantages in the early stages to have a slower eccentric component. Also, it will prolong the time under tension, which is very good at building connective tissue resiliency, connective tissue elasticity as well. So it's a component that's very important. Now, as you're progressing through time to the intermediate or advanced, especially if your goals are more strength-oriented or power-oriented, at one point you need to start accelerating the speed of that eccentric contraction, especially if your goal is ultimately explosive strength, because at that point in time, you need to be able to make use of the kinetic energy developed through the eccentric contraction to allow you to have a more forceful concentric contraction in order to help you increase rate of force development, for example. So in my opinion, the best system is a system that will have a variation of eccentric times. So the novice, beginner, 4-second eccentric, very good base, very good time spent eccentric to build that control. Also, it dissipates a lot of that elastic energy so that your concentric contraction can be a truer expression of strength. But now as you're progressing through time, the intermediate, you might want to use a 3-second eccentric. The advanced, you might want to use a 2-second eccentric to make use of that kinetic energy and that elastic component to the lift. So variation is key. So that to me would be the best system. But a system, if that exists, I'm not sure, but if there is such a system that only uses fast eccentrics from the get-go, I think it's a mistake, and I think they're missing on a wide, broad, solid foundation for a higher peak in performance.
Yeah, it's very much dependent on the population that's training. If we're just talking about people who are training for health and for life, and have no massively grandiose strength or power goals, there's nothing wrong with them just training with a 4-second eccentric for life and then using their modified strongman training, which hopefully they're doing as well, to be exposed to faster tempos and faster velocities there in an environment that's more conducive for those type of velocities. So it's 100% dependent. So obviously, even if someone's goal is strength, you want to build a strength base like Steph was saying with the slower eccentrics. But if they don't have massive goals, you're better being safe with the slower eccentric, building that base, keeping the grooving, somewhat limiting load potential for just better overall results long term.
Because there is something to be said also about injury risks with the general population. And the thing is, once you start moving very heavy weights fast, so like 80% and over, or even like 85% and over fast, like during the eccentric, you need to be very skilled at reverting back to that concentric with full control. And sometimes the problem is a lot of gen pop, especially people who either have a very, very low sporting background in their lifestyle or lifetime, or the last time they were, because, like sometimes you hear this, you evaluate a 56-year-old guy who's been a businessman for 30-something years.
I played football.
Yeah, do you play a sport? Oh, yeah, I used to play football in high school. Yeah, but that was 35 years ago. It doesn't count, right? Yeah. So for these people, they lost some of that skill. So why risk, like affecting like tissue and joints at full range when you don't have the skill to really control all that weight?
Yeah, like so if you're doing a fast eccentric, you create really, really high peak eccentric forces, which is fantastic for the reversal strength and the power output that you can gain from it. But it's also the highest likelihood of injury, because while you're going in the eccentric with less motor units recruited, you're asking the specific motor units and muscle tissues to slow a decent load, because we're talking over 80% here, and reverse it. So at a very quick speed. So it causes really, really high peak eccentric forces.
And in a lengthened position.
And in a lengthened
joints
position.
Take more of a beating when you're doing that too.
So it's just one of those things that the risk reward, you really have to evaluate why you're doing it. For power, it's necessary. Like, you have no option if you really want to express true power. But if you are just training to train, you don't need to.
And also, it's like, it's in the A series, right? People think that we only do 40x0, but like in the B and C series, we play around with tempos a little bit more. If you have specialty techniques, even if you're a novice or an intermediate, like you might get faster tempos in those.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because the A series, because it's our primary multi-joint compound movements, these movements typically have longer ranges of motion. So that's why we pay even more attention to a slower controlled eccentric. But of course, if you ever seen any one of our programs and we have wrist curls or seated calf raise in our C series, you will never, ever see a 4-0-1-0 tempo, because the range of motion is too short. But I wanted to add something, but I lost my train of thought on that.
Was it about anything about the peak eccentric forces or in a lengthened position? 'Cause that's where we left off.
I'm forgetting.
Okay. But basically, you have to earn the right to go faster. So even if someone's not an athlete, you have to show that you can control the 4 seconds. If you can control the 4 seconds, then you're more likely to get like the funkier tempos. But we need to see that it's not just
like... It always goes back to what you're saying, and we see it all the time, it being a real 4 second count, because when we have, and you see it all the time, so many trainees their program says 4-0-1-0, but they're doing a 3-0-1-0, and then they get 3-0-1-0, then it becomes a 2-0-1-0. So they're never really truly building those years of experience doing the 4-0-1-0.
But like, because now you keep talking about like tempos, but the other advantage of like the slower eccentric, and when you're prescribing slower tempos, is a side effect is increased time of retention for a given rep number. And in the early stages, I mentioned it real quick in the beginning, but in the early stages, a thing that's really, really important is to build connective tissue health and resiliency. And the tissue tends to respawn and build itself, like the collagen starts layering itself up way more with total time under tension in a set of 30 to 70 seconds. So by using slower eccentric tempo, it allows you to prolong the time under tension without needing to reduce the weight considerably, as opposed to doing let's say 20 or 30 reps to get your time under tension, because all you want to do is a 1-0-1-0 tempo. So there's this advantage. But also, the point that I wanted to say earlier, it came back to me, is what's also very interesting is if you spend time in the early stages of training, training at a 4-0-1-0 tempo, and you build a really solid base of strength with that tempo, later on in your training career, if you revisit that slower tempo for reason X, Y, Z, it could be an athlete during the GPP when they're coming back from the season to reestablish a base, you'll see that well-trained people at 4-0-1-0 tempo are basically as strong as if they were going to do the exact same amount of reps with a 2-0-1-0 tempo. So it is a skill at the same time that you can build. I know that Porik, you were saying that once you start doing power this year and you sped up your eccentric tempo down from a 4 down to a 2, it felt a little weird.
It took probably 6 weeks to my loads to reestablish.
Because it's a skill.
Yeah, it would have dropped off a little. Just the ability to, obviously there's coordination skill, but then the timing of when you're producing force and stuff, it is 100% a skill. It would have took me about 6 weeks to truly be back at the numbers I would have expected to be at.
Well, that will lead us into the next question. Do you guys still program using the rep continuum and time under tension? Why?
Well, of course, because it's the basis of program design. The 1RM continuum, why use the 1RM continuum? Simply because the repetition is associated to a given intensity, and the intensity of weight that you're using dictates the training response you're going to get from that set. So if you're doing 3 reps is 90% of 1RM, 90% of 1RM develops maximal strength. Whereas if I'm doing 20 reps, which is 60% of 1RM, this is very inefficient for maximal strength development, but it is great for strength endurance development. So the 1RM continuum allows you to select a repetition as a reflection of the strength quality you're trying to emphasize within a certain mesocycle and a certain exercise. So it is very important, but it's also very important to understand that the 1RM continuum only truly applies to multi-joint compound movements. So 5 reps, which is typically 85% of 1RM, won't be 85% on a neck extension or on a seated calf raise. Okay, so this is very, very important to understand. And it's also important to understand that as your training age increases, that 1RM continuum will change. The 1RM continuum that we use, which is a continuum that dates from 1991 or 1992, either or. We like it because it's a very good general average for most people on these lifts. It won't be 100% accurate with everybody, but at least it will guide you pretty accurately on which rep to do and what load to use for a specific strength quality that you're trying to target. Now, the second part of the question is, do we still consider time under tension? Of course we do, because time under tension, I know that it's been, I'd say the last 7 years, people are giving it a little bit of flack, but I don't really understand why. Because it's undeniable that 10 repetitions with 75% of 1RM perform in 10 seconds or 10 repetitions with 75% of 1RM perform in 60 seconds will give you a completely different strength training outcome. There is no denying it. Now, the only thing where people needs to be careful when it comes to time under tension is that you need to understand that for long-term strength development, past the novice stages, the minimum threshold of intensity in order to gain strength is 70% of 1RM. So if you're one of these clients or trainee or athlete that is very, very neurally efficient, that let's say you're very fast twitch and or you have very poor work capacity, what can happen sometimes is if you're doing 12 repetitions on a 4010 tempo, which is a 60-second time under tension, maybe for that person, that 12 rep is not 70% of 1RM. Maybe it's more 60% of 1RM. Yep. So in that case, to follow a rigid, slow tempo to be 60-second under tension for 12 reps at a supposed 70% of 1RM will be completely inefficient because, yes, although you have the rep and the time under tension that's suitable for the development of hypertrophy, the reality is at that point with this specific client, the load is too low to elicit the proper strength training response. So you have to be careful sometimes depending on the client, and you need to readjust. For that person, it's either they shouldn't do 12 reps or they should train faster than 4010 in order to not have to train below 70% of 1RM on the primary multi-joint compound lifts. I don't want viewers to take what I just said as nowhere in strength training ever should you train less than 60%. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying only in your A series primary multi-joint movement, which is the movement in which you're trying to improve efficiency, strength, as your expression of jackness.
Yeah, and people, some people completely disregard the 1RM continuum, and then some people take it way too seriously and try and apply it across the full training session. So you just have to always remember that once you've created fatigue in the A series, you can't look at the 1RM continuum the same. You're now in a fatigue state. Your 8 reps on B series is no longer 78%. You just have to go work to what your current 8 RM in that state of fatigue is.
100%. Yeah.
I know.
Would you say for a new client or a newbie person, so when you don't know their 1RM, how would you, well, I would say like I use the reps in reserve a lot to gauge it. So I think that even if you don't know the person's max 1RM, then you can always, like if you're trying to do 10 reps or 12 reps, you have to gauge if you're in the right zone just by how many reps that they can actually do extra, like, or keep in reserve.
No, you're right. That's a good approach. But the reality is with the beginner though, and this, like old studies have shown that the beginner will improve at intensities as low as 60% of 1RM. So the reality with that clientele, and because strength training is such a novel stimulus for a novel stress for them, a 60% 1RM with 3-4 reps in reserve will be enough of a stimulus to create a strength response. So the best approach with that clientele is to start very conservative. You aim for, let's say, 12 reps. He does 12. You're like, okay, like it looked like you had 5 reps in reserve, no big deal. Do a second set with the exact same weight. Aim for 12, because now at first you want to gauge their work capacity. Mm-hmm. Maybe they'll have a drop off, maybe not. Now they perform 12 again. So maybe the next session now go up a little bit and you do 12. So now maybe it's 4 reps in reserve. But that client will still get a positive training outcome from that stimulus because they don't need the level of force or load that the intermediate or advanced actually needs.
Yeah, even just the level of skill acquisition that novice clients get from week to week, it's nearly impossible to gauge how much, like as a percentage, they should be trying to increase by. Because if someone's starting to really get efficient with a skill, like they could be going up close to 10% a week, no problem. And it's not that they're getting 10% stronger. They're just getting better ability to display their strength they already had.
And I might be wrong here, but like for who first brought that up, but I do know that Hartmann and Tuneman, the two German exercise scientists, in their books, they do even talk about with loads as low as 30% of 1 RM, you can still build intermuscular coordination. So, you know, in the early stages, like your window of intensity to elicit the strength response is huge.
Warwick, I know you're a little bit more following some other people in our industry compared to what Steph constantly sees. Do you know why people have beef with TUT so much, or what they say against it?
No, I think it's just some of the more recent studies haven't said, like, there hasn't been evidence that you need to be over 40 seconds of time under tension to gain hypertrophy. So people are like, all right.
They're taking it with
throw TUT
no context.
Yeah.
Well, but this is only because they're always just looking at hypertrophy on the window of muscle protein synthesis.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
But there's other elements involved in the hypertrophy cascade that can be helpful. Like, it is clear, there is no denying that mechanical tension is the number one key element to trigger hypertrophy response. But it's very short-sighted, in my opinion, to only look at hypertrophy training through that lens. Yeah. There's a little bit more to it.
Well, if mechanical tension was the only thing, you'd be seeing everyone doing sets of 1, 2, and 3 reps and getting jacked. Well, whereas the amount of sets of that low of rep you'd have to do to accumulate enough time under tension is colossal. Yeah.
Which then would create a high level of fatigue. Yeah. But then there's training in the strength endurance window also has a lot of advantages that people are disregarding. Some are as simple as energy substrate storage capacity, which can be not the main, but an important factor in long-term development of hypertrophy. There is a reason why. I mean, I was talking about it in like one of the previous podcasts. I love science. I love research. I love following evidence-based stuff, but not at the expense of tried and true empirical evidence that's been proven to work as well. I like to combine both, and it's very clear that long term, if your hypertrophy scenario encompasses both mechanical tension components and metabolic stress component up to a certain point, as long as you can manage fatigue, you will have a very positive hypertrophy response. And also it will allow you, when you're doing your phases where volume is a little bit more driven, it will allow your joint, tendon, and ligaments a little bit of chilling from all of that heavy load taken to failure all the time.
But even just like doing the higher rep work for like increased capillarization density in the muscle, like that's going to help recovery. It's going to help nutrient partitioning. It's going to help like feed nutrients into the muscle. So, and
the helping recovery, that's a big thing, because what it is that I've been complaining to you about for the last at least 18 months that I see.
People's recovery is shit.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know what the hell happened in the world of training, but it's like people can't recover anymore.
Yeah.
So maybe there is something to be said about
like drive different adaptations for longer term success.
Yeah.
That will lead us into the next question. So not regarding hypertrophy in this specific instance, but the question is, what is the best programming strategy for fat loss in intermediate to advanced clients? This is kind of a fun timing for this one as well.
I mean, to me, like I would refer to our fat loss online course, where we have a structure for intermediate and a structure for advanced, where fat loss is it's simple, but it's a little bit complicated. So there's different approaches you can use. So one that we like, that we teach in these online courses, is based on, because we've seen, like, we've been in the industry long enough to know that Gen Pop sometimes, to have adherence to a nutritional plan is quite a battle. So for that clientele, we've noticed that you have a higher likelihood of success if the training is on the more demanding side of things, on a volume perspective, to try to create some sort of metabolic disturbance that will not only burn calories. Burning calories is important, but it's obviously not the main thing. But there is something to be said about, and this is psychological, where it's not a facet that I like to go in, but for fat loss, it has a huge impact. So what I mean is, if you're doing a very intensive training session, and by intensive, I'm not talking about intensity on a 1RM perspective. I'm talking about like bodybuilding magazine definition of intense. Like hard.
That was intense.
Hard, like you feel like you're going to puke, okay? The thing about that, if you're intermediate or advanced, of course, is it's so daunting, it's so challenging that, and if you're doing it 3-4 times a week, you're less likely to screw up now your nutrition, your recovery. You're not going to go get a burger and fries for lunch if you know you're doing that session at 5 p.m. that night. Okay, so there's this part about training that way that I think that for the client who struggles with the nutrition has this like cool side effect about it. Now, you're creating this huge disturbance because of the high training volume, but also high training density. So we like to use training methodologies like Charles Poliquin's version, like the German body comp, right? So it's a full body session where now you're creating metabolic disturbance, but now in order to kind of mitigate a little bit the fatigue so that the average overall load within the session is higher, you're alternating between lower body and upper body exercises. So that helps with, keeping the rest short, but it helps in not creating this huge drop off as you would, let's say you're doing a Gironda, for example, which is, I personally, it's one of my least favorite method. Because the classic Gironda, it's 8x8 with 30 seconds rest. But the problem is the drop-off is huge. So the average total load is not very high. But with the GBC, you're going lower, upper, lower, upper, lower, upper. And then you have a little rest in between. So by the time you're going back to your lower body, these specific motor units, yes, you're tired systemically, but the specific motor units of the squat, for example, they've had enough time to recover so that the drop-off in weight is not as big. So the average load is there. So then you have these metabolic workouts that sets the tone. But now the problem is these are very demanding. So after a while, after a phase, and we typically like to use 3 weeks, it's time to move away from this, because if you're too stubborn with it and you keep going with that crazy volume and density of training, the client's going to crash and burn.
Definitely not recover.
So then what we do is then we switch to an intensification phase. But the problem is intensification phase in the sense of fat loss does not look at all like an intensification phase in strength training. Like the average load might still be lighter on the 1RM continuum perspective, but now we're using training methodologies where we're shifting the attention. So we're going away from the sheer raw total amount of work done within the training session, and we're trying to target a different aspect of the fat loss equation with that intensification phase. But then, because the training is so grueling, we don't like to prescribe or suggest a significant calorie deficit to the client. It's almost like at that point, you look at this training modality and you look at the client as if he was a strength endurance type athlete. So he still needs to fuel to be able to sustain the workload of the training program. And as you build efficiency with that type of training and the recovery is in check, then you can start manipulating the nutrition. But if you use these training modalities and you create a significant calorie deficit, it will not work. Okay, so that's why I like it with Gen Pop, because it allows you to basically reverse engineer the fat loss process, because a lot of Gen Pop people are fat because their lifestyle and nutritional habits are out of whack. They skip meals, their meals are inadequate. So while you're teaching them to eat, oftentimes in the early stages, they're actually going to eat more, or at least they're going to eat more quality ingredients. So you use that opportunity to fuel their training, so they become more of a quote unquote like furnace, like a metabolic machine with all of that training volume and output. So that's one approach. Yeah. Maybe you guys want to talk about another approach, which we will teach in body comp.
The big thing for fat loss is knowing the people's starting point, time frame. Because if they've got 6 weeks, you're going to use a more aggressive approach than if
someone... And when you say starting point, you're even talking about like body fat, training age, the lot. But like, so if someone's got 6 weeks or 4 weeks, you're going to be aggressive. There's no two ways about it. You have to be to create any sort of level change. If someone's got 12 weeks, you can choose to be aggressive and not have to worry about their nutrition, or you can be somewhat more... I don't want to say not aggressive or lenient, but somewhat more like progressive. Yeah, slower with the process.
Yeah, so it's just it'll be a more sustainable approach long term, but it'll allow you to train more facets. It'll allow you to maintain other qualities, and if the client's good with managing their nutrition, they will have just as good a results, if not better long term, because they won't have detrained other qualities, so they'll be in a better position to get back to more standardized strength training on the other end of it. And then there's simply, if someone's at 10, like if their version of fat loss is go from 10% to 8% or 6%, you better just have dialed in their nutrition and have solid training protocols to maintain muscle mass to the highest level as possible, because at that stage it's 100% nutrition and probably some supplemental cardio to keep up energy output. But
is there something overall, Alex, with nutrition? Is it more when you're talking about like what Steph was saying, when you're not really using a deficit with someone and you're approaching it more on like a 12-week? Are you, obviously we're always prioritizing protein, but are you looking to more lean towards carbs or fats that become the other macro that you're driving?
It depends on the person, but it depends on their training. If you're doing something like GBC that has a really, really high output in terms of training, then I would lean towards carbohydrates more. But if the person just wants to do regular strength training and just really kind of hit the nutrition part, then you could afford to do a little bit more fat and then keep the carbs a little bit lower, because they don't need that much energy to fuel their workouts. But people typically know, like when you start working with someone, they'll know if they do better on carbs versus fat.
Or they know what they like.
Well, they know what they like. But at first, it's like it's important to do what you like, because if you get a new client and then you totally change their nutrition and they hate it and they don't feel good, they're not gonna do it either. So I mean, in the end, it's the caloric deficit. So you can get your caloric deficit from training or from your nutrition, and then your energy substrate, so the carbs versus fat, will depend on your training and your preferences.
Yeah, but if you're trying to do those high volume, high density workouts, low carb, you're going to crash and burn, and you're going to have zero output. Yeah. So you have no option but to fuel.
But what's cool though is to really change it, because we do want to be able to. We as humans, we should be able to. If we don't have carbs, we should be able to fuel ourselves with fats. And then the reverse is also true. Like the best is to be able to switch from...
to be metabolically flexible.
And then that way your body's... It's easy to introduce a new stimulus to your body.
Because the thing too is like if you're very inefficient at using fats for fuel, but you're not providing any carbohydrates, then guess what you're using for fuel? You're using amino acids. Yeah. So then this could like kind of backfire a little bit.
Yeah, because you're just storing.
But and I just want to be clear, like when we said earlier, like for the client where we're not worried too much about the nutrition, like what we really mean, nutrition is always 100% important. But what we mean by this is you have some clients, like let's say for you, for example, you've been doing it for a while. So let's say you want to do fat loss. Then you know that all you need to do is manipulate your nutrition and you're going to hit your targets and it's not a problem. You're going to weigh your food. Like you know exactly what you're consuming. It's a non-issue. So this is the best. But when we're talking about not concerned about nutrition, it's more in the sense that, okay, this client has never followed any nutritional program ever in their lives. So we need to introduce this. We need to slowly incorporate some nutritional strategies. But as you're doing this, you can't use nutrition as your sole provider of fat loss. Yeah. So that's why we're saying that now we focus on the training, but then in the meanwhile, we're slowly building strategies. So, okay, now improve your breakfast. Now have breakfast, for example, have breakfast once and for all. Yeah. Now, okay, is your breakfast the best in the world right now? No, but it's better than nothing. And then once you're good at having your breakfast every morning, okay, now can we tweak this to maybe increase protein a little bit? So while you're doing this, then you focus on the training. But if you have a client that's freaking dialed in with nutrition, you don't need to use as extreme, especially if they have a solid strength training background and a normal, because you know, like when you're really advanced, a normal strength training session, even an upper body session, you're going to have a lot of output. You're going to sweat your ass off. I was saying in a podcast, I once puked doing an arm-only workout. Okay, so you know you can lose fat with standard strength training, but the this happens only when the client has a dialed-in nutrition.
Yeah, it goes back to what everyone kind of saying and what Porrick was saying is, when you are already leaner, and you're more of an advanced client, like for myself, for example, it gets fun when it comes to nutrition in terms of introducing some type of fat loss training, because then it's purely manipulation very specifically with my nutrition that I can play around with because I know where I'm starting. I know what my calories were. I know what my macros were. And then playing around with driving carbs when I need them and being more specific with it.
So this way with your training, we can actually work on using strategies to maintain or even keep on improving your strength instead of using a training system that will invariably lead to losses in strength. I mean, it's just like
the nature of
nature of the workout.
And then you're also going to be in the position that you know, if you want to keep your calories slightly higher, so you don't need to actually pull as many calories, that you can manipulate that through slightly more output in your training session. But it can be way more calculated than the onslaught of the aggressive approach, where then we're just trying to increase good habits when it comes to nutrition. Yeah. So it just gives you a couple more levers to play with.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to talk about on that specifically, or move on to another question?
No, I think that's the thing. We covered it.
You leaving all the secrets in the box for next year's body composition seminar?
Yeah, it's going to be a great course, by the way. When's the first one again?
April.
Yeah.
The one other thing is, don't neglect your NEAT. Okay, there you go. That's it.
Yep.
We don't need to go any further.
Okay, so another one. So this is kind of two questions. I'll start with the first half. Is strength training enough to improve mobility limitations?
To improve, yes.
Yeah, limitations too being a key word.
Yeah.
Not like full restrictions or injuries.
To improve limitations, yes.
But it won't get you like...
To truly build mobility, we don't think so.
No, like it really depends on what people are considering a limitation, what they're considering an optimal end goal. Like it's very, very like murky there, but like you can definitely improve mobility through strength training alone.
Yeah, when done properly.
When done properly.
As always.
Oh yeah, like you don't even have to do anything fancy. If you just train through as long of range of motion that you can do in a safe manner under load, you're going to improve mobility.
Well, and then like, to get back to that first question, which part of the which mode of contraction has the greatest impact on malleability of tissue for a range of motion?
Your eccentric.
The eccentric phase.
And I think it's like I always think about Alex training my dad. He has a shit ton of mobility restrictions, limitations, and he's not going to stretch and do other forms of stuff. He shows up for his 3 sessions a week, and you manipulate tempos a lot with his training, and you can see him gaining more range throughout the training all the time.
But
it's a process.
If you want to be a hurdler, elite level, you're going to need more than strength training.
Yeah.
If you want to be able to do the splits,
exactly.
you're going to have to stretch.
Do the splits.
For sure. And then that goes into the next question. Thoughts on functional range conditioning, FRC, for mobility? That's
great. That's awesome. In my opinion, it's the best mobility modality out there. Like everything, I really like what Andrea Ospina created on it's very scientifically sound and makes a lot of sense. It works.
And Alex and Stefan both attended it 2-3 years ago in Las Vegas.
No, 6 years ago, 2018.
Okay, wow. In Vegas, and then just last year?
2 years.
No, 2023.
Yeah, it was last year.
Okay.
So last January, all 3 of you, so Porrick, Alex, and Stefan attended FRC. I just got the benefits of them telling me what to do with it after.
No, it's great. Like, listen, do I like doing it?
Yeah,
no, but it's great. It works well. It's challenging.
It's time consuming, but it's
time consuming, but it works. But that's training,
but
right? Everything in training. If you want to improve, you need to put in the time. Like it's like magic tricks are fine, but they're just like neural disinhibition that lasts a few hours. But if you want true range of motion, you need to train it. And in order, and when it comes to training range of motion, I firmly believe that FRC is above and beyond. Like if you have like high goals in terms of range of motion, I mean, go for it. It's really hard.
Yeah.
It is.
You probably want like a TV or something in the background because it's boring as shit.
And I would also recommend you do these as a separate session. It's it's hard if you're going to do it for real.
To truly implement what like an FRC session looks like.
It's really hard to integrate truly efficiently. Like once you have a base, a good base of range of motion, and you're looking more to maintain or fine tune, it's fine. But if you're tight as hell and you're really trying to build true mobility, do it as a separate session. You're going to have much better results.
Like I know after the course for a while when I was dealing with all my injuries, I was doing that exclusively. So like a session was like an hour and a half. And now that I'm more back to my weight training, I can still just do like really quick 15-minute, like in my warm-up mobility stuff, I can do it and maintain what I got. But I had to spend like a lot of time, just dedicated time doing it.
I do like using the
cars,
the cars in the warm-up, the hips, the shoulders. I pretty much always have those before my
the cars are great as a warm-up because it sends a readiness signal, if you want, to the main joint you're going to use in your training session.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. What else do we have? I do have a question that we have answered many a times before, but we will do it again. So getting a client to do their first chin-up, preferred reps, sets, and preparations. So for those of you that do not know, we will talk about it right now, but we do have the 3-part chin-up progression on our YouTube channel.
And there's the entire section in the program design course online dedicated to it, too.
And in many Coffee with Steph episodes and in many articles and posts.
We have videos.
So if we want to go over.
So first step. So you want to work the eccentric
So first, I do think it is important to point out one thing that I know you might have gotten to, but you can't implement this with someone that is overweight.
Oh, for sure.
So you do have to consider that. So like in that, they have to lose weight in order to.
So my first thing when I do it with a client, can they just hang and hold themselves for 10 seconds?
Yeah.
Like if you can't even do that, then you're not ready for the progression. My next step will be like, can you hold yourself in the top contracted position for 10 seconds? So those are the first 2 tests. Now you can do that. All right. So the first step then is to do 10-second eccentric. So you set up like the platforms or whatever on the power rack so that you can start all the way on top. You use a medium neutral grip, and you do as many 10-second eccentric reps as you can in one set. So let's say if you have 5 sets, the goal is to get to 15 eccentric reps. So if you have 5 sets, that means you're trying to spread it out where you're doing 3 eccentric reps per set. Once you do the 3, then you run over to the lat pull down and you do 8 reps. It's 8?
10 reps, 4, 0, 1, 0.
On the pull down, just so that you're building volume in those tissues.
With the same grip.
With the same grip. So after now a lot of people won't be able to do it 10 seconds. So maybe you'll start with a 5-second and you do that 3 times for 3 reps. So you can build either the reps, you can build the time under tension with each of those up to 10 seconds. Once they can do 15 total reps in the workout of the eccentric reps, then you move on to stage 2 where you're doing more of an isometric. So 1 rep will look like there's 3 isometric pauses. So you start on top, go down about a quarter of the way, hold for 10 seconds, go down halfway, hold for 10 seconds, and then go down to about a quarter, 3/4. Yeah. And then you go all the way down, and then you also finish that with the pull downs.
I do think a lot of people misperform that one, and they do the first pause
right on top.
On top. So you do have to go down that first quarter and hold it there.
Yep. So for that one, the goal is to get 12 total reps. Once you can get, typically people, I mean, in my experience, I don't know about you guys, but people don't even get to 12 total reps and they can do 1 chin up.
Yeah.
But let's say
we're still looking for more than 1 chin up in order to do it anyway.
Yeah. So once you pass that, then the third stage is you do how many reps that you can do, and then you have your coach help you to get to 6 total reps. So if you only get 2 reps on your own, have your coach spot you, help you on the concentric, then you're still doing the eccentric tempo for 6 reps, and then you slowly build your reps from there. But
yeah, because eventually you'll be able to do 6 on your own. Once you can do 6 on your own, which is the average rep you'll perform in a lifetime, then you don't need the spotter. You can just keep on going on your own.
Yeah.
Do your chin. But it's important to understand that this procedure is for people who cannot do a rep.
Yeah.
If you have a client that can do 2 reps, don't do that. Yeah. If they can only do 2 reps, go straight to phase 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as a reminder, we do not use bands on chin-ups. So it is that the coach has to assist those reps in that final progression, not start using bands to help get the...
Nor do we like the assisted chin-up machine either, because the carryover isn't there.
Yeah. 2 things. So just for clarification, if you feel either the 2 first tests that Alex brought up, so the hanging test or the holding top range of motion, or actually the client's overweight, revert back to
pull downs.
Yeah. So that's what you do to replace it. And the other thing is phase 2 sucks.
It's so bad.
It sucks for the clients. It sucks for the coach. It sucks for everyone. So be patient.
Yeah. And it'll take
time. And try to be as consistent with the points of pauses as possible, because the clients are not going to be. So you're going to have to very much coach them into the right position so they're not all over the place with their pauses.
But it works.
It works.
We've all seen it work. We know all our coaches that use it. It works.
But the last point that's really important, that some people bypass that, this method really works, and only really works if you perform it twice a week.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, switching topics again. Speed strength training methods and special exercises that aren't in the database. So first off, I do want to clarify that there are no specialty methods in the exercise database. That is simply an exercise database, not a specialty technique database. So then, speed strength training methods and special exercises that you like.
Well, so speed strength, specialty technique exercise that are not in the database, all of them.
Yeah, I don't even know if we have any real like power-based exercises in the database. I don't think we have any.
No.
We maybe have
Push press.
push press.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. So there's a lot to cover here.
But we can just cover some.
Okay.
So do you want to start or I start?
Okay, so just reread the question and I'll try and...
Speed strength training methods and special exercises.
Okay, so speed strength training methods and special exercises. So the first thing to consider is not every exercise has to be a special exercise. Doing normal exercises with adjusted percentages works as speed strength exercises. So you see a squat, you see a bench press, you see all our normal primary movements. If that is done, say with or without accommodating resistance, anywhere from probably 40% barbell weight up to 80% barbell weight, if you're doing it with the right intent and rep schemes, can be considered a speed strength exercise. So that's to start with. Then when we're looking at speed strength, we're looking at working the full speed strength continuum. So working from maximum strength, which is still part of the speed strength continuum, right down to max velocity, which is sprinting. So we're going to have to work through explosive strength, starting strength, reactive strength, and then within explosive strength, you can look at like a heavy explosive strength, medium, light, and then the best way to work explosive strength depends on what section of that explosive strength you're trying to fall in. Heavy explosive strength is going to be more barbell orientated. The medium and light could now move into more ballistic work. So jumps, throws, all that good stuff. Starting strength, while it still falls under the explosive strength family, it is with the addition of static overcome by dynamic. So the implement has to be completely static before the initiation of movement to truly train starting strength. But that's going to be light. We have found it is best trained with a ballistic action because most people struggle to generate enough velocity with a standard exercise. So, but just changing that to a ballistic exercise so they can accelerate the whole way through has made a huge difference to make it that a lot more accessible to a lot more people. And then once you get to reactive, you're more talking about jumps and plyometrics. So anything that's going to try and minimize ground contact time and use a stretch shortening cycle.
Yeah. So, I mean, just, like he did a very good summary of the whole continuum. But then it really depends who you're training and why you're using it. So, for example, if you're using speed strength to build just like standard power for the context of your strength training, then doing heavy or medium explosive strength with barbell exercise and accommodating resistance will serve you the best because that's going to be the most specific. So like using chains, bands, on standard movements like squats and bench and stuff like that will work really well because it's going to be more specific to the task that you're doing all the time. Now, if you're training athletes, you're going to get to a point where you will need to work explosive strength in a ballistic fashion because sports, you always have a release when you're doing an expression of power. So the ballistic will be much more useful. And then starting strength, like you said, starting strength is hard as hell to train. You need to have some experience with pure explosive strength first, because the one thing about starting strength is it's all about teaching the nervous system to recruit as many motor units as possible within an action in the early onset of a movement as you're starting the concentric acceleration. So the load needs to be very light so that you can generate movement fast enough to work the starting strength window. Because if you look at starting strength, the action needs to be started within 50 milliseconds. It's so quick that you can't afford to have heavy weights. It's going to take too much time to start moving that load with heavy weight. So it needs to be very light. So that's why Porrick was saying that you're better off with ballistics, because you're going to have more range of motion that can be done in a fast fashion to generate enough speed to reach the minimum threshold of speed to develop starting strength. So, yeah,
and it does get very important to have something like to measure the speed when you're working with these things.
It definitely, it's not necessary, but it definitely helps.
It's not necessary, because that's what I've done throughout my career back in the days, training athletes, because there was no such things.
But you also you developed an eye for it.
Yeah, but still, like, I mean, like, it's so, let's say you're doing a squat, the difference between like 1.2 and 1.3, visually it's impossible to tell, but but on a quality perspective, 1.2 works something different than 1.3.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is, now fortunately we have the technology to be able to have better training outcomes. So why not use them? But like, just real quick, a good example of starting strength would be a supine med ball toss.
Yep.
So you're lying on your back, you have a med ball on your chest, right? So now you cannot generate you cannot preload eccentrically, because the ball is on your chest, and you go right from your chest and you throw the ball as high as you can. So a light enough ball, let's say 10 pounds. So now the weight is light enough that now you can generate enough force to propulse the implement fast enough to work on starting strain. But then you have enough range through elbow extension to be able to generate the level of speed that's needed to work starting strain. But if you were to do a bench press with bands, for example, and a barbell, you would need a very, very light bar and a decent amount of band tension so that you don't blow out your elbows at full extension. But now the problem is you will need to be extremely well trained in starting strength to be able to move that implement fast enough to work starting strength. So starting strength is this one to me is the hardest one to do without the tracking devices.
Because one idea of how you could compare tracking and non-tracking would be like a backwards med ball throw. So say you have no ability to track the velocity on that, but you can track distance. So okay, they're at this distance, they can try and beat that each rep. That takes a lot of space and it takes time.
Yeah.
But now you have a device you can wear on your wrist and it's going to give you a peak velocity and wattage output. It's far more convenient. It's not necessary, but it's far more convenient. So it's just one of those and then it stores it in a cloud so you don't have to track it yourself.
And we use the output. We use it for ourselves. We use it in our classes, like the sports and specialty technique class. And it works well. It's accurate. It's versatile. You can use it for jumps, for throws, so many things.
So there's definitely huge advantages. It's just if people don't have it, they can still train the speed strength continuum. You just have to be smarter with how you do it.
Yeah. Okay. That was a little bit more rapid fire. We got through a few more questions today. To wrap up this episode, we're not going to go into detail because I do think that'll be a whole other episode, but I do want to bring up the 2025 Kilo education schedule. So it is released. Our early bird pricing is now. We're super pumped for next year's schedule. It is our most packed schedule we've ever had. We're doing 3 instances of the majority of the courses. So on top of that, we moved all of our seminars to 2-day seminars because we did notice and we were getting feedback from students that As much as we love the longer seminars and as much as there are students out there that like the longer seminars, the 2-day Saturday and Sunday seminars work best for most coaches. You miss the least amount of work. You can get here and get back to work. So all of our courses are 2 days. We do have some new courses that we are adding onto the schedule as well. So I'll just quickly go over what courses we have. We have PAB, Progressive Anatomical Adaptation Blocks. We have our Sports Performance Seminar. We have an updated Body Composition Seminar. So for any of you who have completed our previous fat loss or hypertrophy or body composition training camp, this is not the same content. We are 100% saying that it's different. And then we have 2 one-day courses. These courses only have 1 instance on the schedule right now because there are no practical sessions, so we have a higher amount of people that can attend, and that is the Comprehensive Periodization Seminar. We are putting that on once next year at our facility, and a Comprehensive Program Design Seminar. So those will be back-to-back in May, and you can do those bundled as well. So as a reminder, PAB, Sports Performance, Body Composition, and Comprehensive Periodization and Program Design. And then on top of that, we have our Strength Assessment Workshop in the start of the year and the last part of the year. So we are ready for 2025. Our early bird is now, so be sure to register, grab your spots. Anyone else want to say anything for 2025?
Yeah, so all of these 2-day courses, they're all Saturday and Sunday. So it's even more convenient to you guys in terms of missing work and stuff.
And then PAB, 2 days, sports is will be a lot like what it has been, but you're just restructuring it in terms of...
I mean, it's updated. Of course, like we're bringing it down from 3 to 2 days, so it will be more concentrated, but also over the years doing the sports camp, we're able to see feedback and trends, so we're going to adjust. Like every year we're trying to create courses or make changes to make it better for you guys. So based off of the feedback, we're changing the model where now we're going to focus more on a shorter off season, which is more current with what you guys have to deal with. So it will allow us to dig deeper into more precise programming strategies for a 12 to 16 week off season instead of the longer layout that, you know, it was just, we recognize it was not as applicable to a lot of you guys. And even the tests that we're going to use, we're going to make sure that there are tests that you guys can do with anyone.
Yeah. So 2025, be sure to secure your spaces now. LearnKilo.com for the full schedule. See you next year, fam.